Jesus is still kneeling on the Sermon on the Plain. He's still doing his healings and his teachings at the same time, I'm imagining. The Sermon on the Plain lasts from Luke 6:17 till about Luke 49, 6:49. So just those few verses comprise this Sermon on the Plains. A little shorter, a lot shorter actually than the Sermon on the Mount. But powerful words have never been spoken. Impossible goals are set, right? Last week we talked about Jesus being in the earth and talking earthly and talking about action and those kinds of things. Now he's really putting it to them. This is where the rubber meets the road, so to speak. He's not asking them to do something easy. It's not. I had a thought of sitting at my desk in Pennsylvania at Walker Tech, in the bunker. Is below ground under the house, so if anything happened like a bomb, we'd be protected and still be able to make speakers and electronics for the digital organs. Watching in the morning as the planes crashed into the towers and not believing what I'm seeing. And I follow it, we follow it, and we still think about it. It never leaves us. And yet, when we look at these words that Jesus is talking, how do we turn the other cheek? Is that what we're to do? In this case, right, is that an impossibility, with something like that? Is it possible to forgive those who don't even look for forgiveness or don't even regret what they do? How hard is that? There's a story in Word in Season this morning that I read for the devotions. A little girl goes to the store and steals something and is so overcome with regret and guilt that she confronts her mom and she confesses all that she had done. And her mother said, "That was really brave of you to do that. Took a lot of courage. I admire you for doing that, and I hope you learn that it's not right to do that." And then with the same breath, she said, "Let me tell you a story when I was younger and I stole." And putting it into perspective that, that we all do. And we're all in need of forgiveness as we're all in need of forgiving others. And how in the messiness of life that becomes very tough sometimes to do. We know that family members can hold grudges for years because maybe the years just go by so quickly. Maybe as time goes on, it becomes harder and harder to say what we need to say to those that we've hurt or to those who have hurt us. And so sometimes 20, 30, even longer years go by and nothing gets said, and there's a big rift between the relationship. Jesus is healing people, and he's making people whole at the same time and addressing the people, not only the disciples, but saying, this is something that we all need to work on. It's very real for us. You found more times in your life that you've been in need of forgiving others, but also remember that we're on the giving end too. We often think of these verses as being personal, that individual things, that to put them in the context of a society as a social, that's much tougher to do and to think about because there's so many variables involved. For instance, the 9/11, do you turn the other cheek? Is that the right thing to do? Is that something we want to condone or something we want to continue to have happen? Or being in a relationship that's abusive and you can turn your other cheek and turn your other cheek and turn your other cheek and nothing ever changes. And the love that you once had for the other person diminishes and it becomes extinguished as their love for you is complicated and probably not even there. We talked with the kids last week in confirmation about forgiveness and forgiving. And God gives and God forgives. And we made a point to the kids to say, sometimes it's okay to forgive from a distance. We don't have to continue in relationships that are destructive to both people, parties, however that works. We can forgive, but never see again. And that's also in the wheelhouse of, I believe, what Jesus is talking about too. Oftentimes, if we're in a relationship that we love someone, they don't love us back, and they abuse us or whomever, we forget the piece that says love others, and love your neighbor, but also as yourself. So the piece of loving the self is sometimes diminished or forgotten. Forgive and you'll be forgiven. And what a weight that is off our shoulders if we can truly forgive. These ways of Jesus are a way of trying to free us. Free us to love more. Free us to give more of ourselves. Free us to take care of ourselves too. It's important for us to do that. We find that in this reading that Joseph has been in need of forgiving his brothers, and they have been unknowingly in need of being forgiven by Joseph, although they don't realize that he was still alive, I imagine. All they know is they sold him off, and that was the end of it. Whether he lived or died, I imagine they didn't think too much about it. Reuben and some others may have thought about it and regretted it. They certainly did. But now we have a story of Joseph turning it around and saying, you know what, I forgive you. Things have turned out for good. God does for good what you intended for evil. Then we have the story of Jacob stealing Esau's birthright, and the rage that Esau feels for Jacob, and the years it takes for them to settle down and continue with their lives and prosper on their own until he can decide that, maybe it's worth it that I forgive Jacob, and Jacob on his part to ask the forgiveness of his brother, who he's wronged over all those years. We find that oftentimes it's a fine line between giving and enabling too. As a first call pastor at Nativity, there was a gentleman that came on pretty much every Wednesday and asked for money for his sick wife. So I would give him $10, $15, $20. We had a kitty for that kind of thing in the church. And I helped him with his resume so that he could find a job. And he did, and then he didn't like his job, so he quit. And I think he found another job, but he still kept coming by. And we had one day a person who was working on the furnace, and it was a Wednesday, so he said, I know that guy. He goes to every church and asks for money all the time. That's what he does. And so for me, my heart hardened. No more. That's it. I'm not going to be taken advantage of anymore. I'm not going to enable his behavior anymore. And so he didn't come by anymore. And I don't know how he fared, but I felt I did what I could to get him on his feet. I helped him with money and a resume and encouragement. And maybe that was all they could do. I don't know. Only God knows. But we can do what we can do. Carol read the scriptures, and we're all part of that. Sinner and those who sin and those who don't sin, the saint-sinner thing at the same time. We can identify with all those aspects of the readings that we read today and always. Jesus is kneeling at our feet, ready to forgive us and encourage us and challenge us to be our better selves. And keep in mind that people are hurting too. That we need to be mindful of others, as we're mindful of ourselves too. We all have needs. But he's pushing us to see our better selves. And he's telling us that he's got it covered, even though we can't often find the strength and courage or willpower or whatever have you to do the work he is asking us to do, judging and forgiving and all those kinds of things. Jesus has us covered because he provides all that we need. He's got it covered. He's got it covered. Amen.